Now do that.
Oh, there you go. Okay, it's recording now.
We're back.
Let's get it out.
Did we catch any of that, or are we just okay? So the opening lines. Let's do it again. Om, Delek, Sugir, Cheek. And who can tell me what Om is made up of?
From all,
Om, which represents
body, mind, speech.
body, speech, and mind.
Body,
Of
of
an enlightened being, of a Buddha.
Buddha.
So the body that we're talking about is the paradise body and the emanation bodies. The speech is mainly what those emanations can say to you. You know, they do say that enlightened beings, it's not possible for them to change your karma. It's not possible for them to take you out of your samsara. It's impossible. All they can do is teach you how to do, teach you how to do that for yourself, because only you can do that. But the most powerful activity that an enlightened being can do is to speak the Dharma to you. And anything that is, it doesn't even have to be, you know, ye old scriptures, the way that we're learning it specifically. It's anything that significantly shifts your mind enough that it enables you to have a cessation of your mental afflictions. And that's pretty powerful. The mind is where we're talking about the Buddha's omniscience. So back to the bodies of a Buddha, like in other classes, those of you who've learned this have learned about the body and the mind of a Buddha, and then they're broken down into two parts each, right? In this instance, body, speech, and mind of a Buddha, the body refers to the two physical versions, and the speech is the activity, and the mind is one of the other bodies, which is known as omniscience. So a Buddha is omniscient, but they're not omnipotent, okay? They're not all-powerful, but they know everything, past, present, and future, in a single instant, and they know exactly what you need.
What is omnipotent?
Omnipotent is all-powerful. Like, they can't, if they were all-powerful, they could take us out of suffering.
Okay.
They would have done it by now, because they love. They have infinite love. They have infinite compassion and all of that, but they and they do have power, but it's not omnipotence. They are omniscient, though, which is actually a skill that you can start to cultivate even now. You can start, it's a really cool thing to walk through your day as if everyone could read your mind. How would you behave if everybody that you ran into could read your mind in that instant, right? It's an interesting way to walk through the day. And they do say that, you know, we've talked about the bodhisattva levels, right? The different bhumis. You get onto the first one when you have your direct perception of emptiness on the path of seeing. And by the time you get to a 10th level bodhisattva, which is not a Buddha yet, you're really close though. By the time you're up there, you're already able to be very intuitive and to, you have a lot of cities, a lot of powers. And so you can start to get good at all of this stuff even way before you reach that. But once you are a Buddha, then there's no obstacles, there's no walls between just knowing all there is to know. They say knowing perfectly what to take up and what to give up. Would be useful, wouldn't it? Okay, so that's the Om part, okay? Day, this part, means happiness. And Lek means goodness. So in this instance, Lek refers to nirvana and Buddhahood. That's what they mean by goodness. And day, the happiness, refers to higher births. Do you guys remember from last course what the lower births were? Do you remember there was the animal realm, hungry ghost, and hell, right? So this means that day means that you avoid those 3 lower realms, okay? And just keeping yourself out of them is how they're defining happiness in this particular sentence, in this statement. So lei refers to that state of mind that you would achieve if you were never ever again to be able to be in those 3 lower realms. So that's a sense of happiness, right? And if you truly get to a cessation of any of the causes that would get you there, you would be in nirvana. But then they move further to say it's not just nirvana, it's also encompassing full Buddhahood, which is where you truly have the power to be of service to all living beings, right? And to take other beings to that place where you've gotten to. So the last part, sugirjik, that just means may there be. May there be. So a general translation of that would be, may all living beings achieve temporary happiness. That means stay out of the animal realm, stay out of the lower realms, right? And may they achieve nirvana and Buddhahood.
Why is it temporary happiness?
Well, temporary happiness is the nirvana because they're not in full Buddhahood yet.
Okay.
So it's encompassing all of it, covering all the bases. And he's calling on all of the Buddha. Jitsunkapa this is his opening statement, right? He's calling on all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas by saying Om. So just to go over that again, Om, calling all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, may all sentient beings reach temporary happiness and ultimate happiness, be another way to say it. So that's the meaning of the very first opening lines. And the next sentence, oh, actually, I didn't write it. Okay. This is really, really long. So repeat after me. Kala, Dena, Deladu, Tape, Dropa, Dumpe Drop, Droshe, Drenbe, Ningbo Cho, Soso Tarche, Tapakang. You've heard the word so-so before, right? Some of you? So-so kewo, which means a normal being, like a so-so person. So-so actually means individual. So you can shorten that whole statement to this. Say sotar, gidomba. So the so-so is in here, and it means individual. In Sanskrit, it's pratimoksha. Okay? We've often heard the word moksha in yoga, meaning freedom, and prati means individual. Okay? So we're going to break this down and by the way, Sotargi Drompa, which is the Tibetan, or Pratimoksha, is the subject of the Vinaya. Okay? It's the subject matter, period, of the Vinaya scriptures. So it's kind of an important word. We're going to unpack it just so that we know exactly what it means. And we're going to actually refer to Nilchu Dharmabhadra's commentary on this one. That was Lama Quicksilver, if you don't remember from first class. Basically, they're called individual freedom vows because individuals who keep them reach nirvana, and those who don't. So basically, these vows enable the individual to reach happiness. Okay? It's an individual matter whether you reach freedom or not. And they're talking freedom from suffering is what they're referring to. Let's look at the Sanskrit. Prat can also mean first, and as we said before, moksha is freedom or free. So sometimes they're explained as the first freedom vows. But then you could take that to the debate ground and go, after you get them, is it still the first vows, right? Like, is it the first time you get the vows, or is it the first vows you get? Because they're not necessarily the first vows you get. So it gets a little tricky. And Geshe-la likes the translation of individual freedom vows on this. But that explanation or that translation of it being sometimes called first freedom vows is in ancient scriptures, which is why it's mentioned here. So back to Tsongkhapa, he gives a definition, and this is the definition. So say Nyengjung, Sampe, Gyuje-ne, Shenmu, Shidan, Chipa-li-dakpa. So, the definition, okay, so Nyenjen means renunciation. Sampe here means motivation. Gyuje-ne means the reason why. Shen means other beings. Nu, sorry, that should be an N. Nu means to hurt them. And Shidang Chepa means along with its basis. Li means from. And Dokpa means turning away from or refraining from. So if you string those all together, Tsongkhapa's very, very brief definition of the Pratimoksha vows is, if you know how to get them, keep them, and fix them, you know the entire Vinaya. And so embedded in that, it tells us that the individual freedom vows are primarily about refraining from hurting others. Refraining from hurting others and the basis of hurting others. And because that's the main focus, your motivation would be one of renunciation. And renunciation is defined as being sick and tired of this suffering life and really being motivated to do something about it. Yes?
I'm a little confused. So when you say pratimoksha vows, we know there are 10 of them. Or you're talking about the whole Vinaya, which is monks?
Actually, you're thinking of the 10 non-virtues.
Yeah, so this is different.
This is, we're talking about, remember from last class, we're talking about the first 7, and all of their brothers and sisters, which was 80,000 or something like that it was. So it's more than just the 10 non-virtues are encompassed in the individual freedom vows, in the pratimoksha vows.
So when you say individual freedom vows, they are not...
Well, we're going to get into them. Because, actually, you know what? Hold that question, because we're going to get into what the pratimoksha vows... Pratimoksha is a general name for the vows that basically have to do with not hurting others and the causes of that. Within that, yes, are the 10 non-virtues. Within that are your refuge vows. Within that are ordination vows, which we're not going to know the full details of. But there's different layers, and we're at the end of this class, we're going to talk about 8 categories of pratimoksha vows. So, yeah. It's a good question, but hold on to that thought, and if it's not answered by the end of class, come talk to me, okay? But this actually takes us back to the motivation. which was Geshe-la's question in class 1, right? Like, why are we here? Why are we going to spend 10 weeks studying this stuff? And the motivation had to be really one of renunciation. Like, we actually coached it in the positive in many ways in that first class. We said the goal was to reach nirvana. The goal was to reach the cessation of all our mental afflictions. And then we defined samsara so that we knew clearly what nirvana was. It was not nirvana, right? I mean, sorry, it was not samsara. It was the opposite. So in this class, we're getting a much clearer description of the type of renunciation that we're looking for and how we're going to actually achieve that. And that's what the Vinaya is there for. The Vinaya is really also, the Vinaya is also the whole study of the code of ethics in a monastery too. So it's basically the study of ethics, of ethical behavior.
In a monastery.
In a monastery is what it's called. Like the monks study the Vinaya. And then at a broader level, it's the code of ethics for any of us who want to reach happiness. So that's also why Geshe-la taught this as an open course, because herein lies all of the keys. Remember that in the first class it said that if we have and we understood the Vinaya scriptures, the Buddha lives, and also is really all you need to know.
It says where Vinaya is, I am there.
That's right, exactly. I have to say, though, if we could even perfect any of these ACI courses, like any one topic that's taught in any of these, if we could truly perfect it, yeah, we'd be there. But our minds are constantly seeking distraction, right? So we're being given all these different tools for our Dharma kit. I don't know about you, but I need them. So it's interesting, too, because if you do listen to this audio after this class, you'll hear that Geshe-la had a really samsaric day that day that he taught this class.
Yeah.
And, right? And the ups and downs and the...
It humanized him.
Yeah.
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 The audio.
Well, listen to the audio afterwards, and of this class. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good idea to listen to the audio after anyways. But he really, you have to remember, this is back in the 90s, and he was still working in the diamond company at this time. And it was a high-stressed, high-powered corporate job, right? And, he is a fully ordained, realized being by this point. But he's, talking about the shifts and changes. I actually find it really beautiful because he's doing exactly what Lord Buddha did in the Jataka tales, right? Like he's giving you, this was my day, this was what I did, and this is where my mind went. And, he's trying to teach us, A, to be aware of it and to watch it and to not beat yourself up about it, but he's also giving us what we can do about it, right? So
I have a question related to that.
Sure.
The notes you have there that's just direct transcription of his talk, of his lecture.
Some. It's partly a transcription. It's partly based on the courses that we've taken on this, and it's based on the notes and the homework. And we also weave in, if you've noticed, other influences of ACI as they're relevant. But we do try to stay fairly true to his transcription, to what he said in his class. Yeah. Yeah, and Geshe-la does spend a lot of time talking about, again, just reviewing what he talked about last class, which was that, or the class before, which is that, the causes of our suffering are because things are impermanent, but we just don't, we expect them not to be. Or we have expectations of our world being a certain way, and when they don't turn out that way, we get disappointed or upset because we're not understanding the real causes for it. If we did understand the real causes for it, as things happened in the moment that it happened, whether it was good, bad, or otherwise, we would observe it as a ripening of our karma and know exactly what to do with it in that instant. But, for most of us, that realization isn't instantaneous. It isn't in that moment. But the more you practice this and the more you keep your book, that awareness does become much closer. And even if it's still after the fact, knowing what to do about it comes to you much faster. And that's another reason for really understanding the subject matter and having it. If you'll notice too in the audios, he repeats the same lesson several times, usually a minimum of 3 times within the body of what he's saying. And that's, or watch for that next time you're listening, because he does do that. And it's interesting that he Geshe-la embeds the philosophy of us needing to hear these things many, many times within the presentation of how the material is delivered also. It's really beautiful. You know, and also warning us away from wrong motivation. We shouldn't be taking vows in the first place just because our friends are, or because everybody else in the class is and I should too, or because we want to look good somehow. You know, most of the vows in the Bodhisattva vows, if you notice, for those of you who have Bodhisattva vows, a lot of it has to do with not having the motivation of fame or gain, or, you know, for your own ego or your own gratification, right? Pride, right, is a big one. So it's really important to have the right motivation, but it's really important to be reminded of those because it happens all the time. Those of you who have studied the 8 worldly thoughts, it's another Dharma teaching of the causes of our unhappiness. 8 worldly thoughts happen all the time. You know, you're happy. Do you guys remember what they are? You know, you're happy. I probably got the order wrong, but you're happy when people speak highly of you. You're unhappy when they criticize you. You're happy when you're well known. You're unhappy when you're not. You're happy when you feel good. You're unhappy when you don't. What was the other one?
You're happy when you get stuff.
When you get stuff that you want, right? And you're unhappy when you don't. So it's that constant reminder, and again, that nothing external to you is going to bring you your happiness. If they appear to, it's because they are a delivery system and the causes and conditions have ripened for you. But the proof that they're not the bliss causing or the happiness bringing is because if they were, they would do it all the time, 24/7, without fail. You could never, ever not feel that happiness in their presence, in anything they said, thought, or did towards you. And that would be Buddhahood, actually. It's kind of cool. So these vows, these individual freedom vows, are our ticket out. It's what is going to, it's actually, Geshe-la says it's the only thing that's going to get you out of samsara. So this word here, shenmu, is hurting others. Because you want to get out of suffering, you refrain from hurting others. So this whole long sentence, right? The next line in Jetsunkapa's commentary is really just, again, nailing home the topic of the Vinaya, which is refraining from, it's like the ahimsa, which is the first limb of the 8 limbs of yoga, right? 8 limbs of Patanjali. And it's right back down to that. Now, Nuchu Dhamma, remember we're in his little commentary part now for this statement. He wants us to actually really understand what the basis is. Remember we said it was the no harm, but also the basis for harm that we're trying to eliminate. So the basis, he says, actually refers to 2 things. And on one hand, he says that this is how Jetsunkapa slides in the other 3 of the 10 non-virtues. Remember last class we said the Vinaya primarily deals with the body and speech, not the mind. So we're talking about the first 7 of the 10 non-virtues. But by saying, and their basis, Nuchijama Bhadra says, Jetsunkapa actually says, well, that's where he fits in the other three. Because all of your downfall of body and all of your downfall of speech are motivated by the downfalls of your mind anyways. So that's one way to look at it. The other basis is actually, and it's not really itemized in the Lung for this class, but it does refer to, in scripture, Lord Buddha laid out all the things that you shouldn't do. So the bad deeds that one should not do, that one should refrain from. And that's another one. That's a little bit more complicated. You have to dig a little bit further into the scriptures to find those. But those are the two parts. There's another one too where if you're in deep, deep meditation, there's kind of like this natural protection against doing bad deeds, because when you're in deep meditation, you're physically not doing anything, and mentally you're focused on your meditation and you're not saying anything. So you're protecting yourself, you're refraining from doing any harm, right? But we also remember from another class, not this course, but we talked about it in the last course, about how if we get really, really good at certain layers of meditation, that we can just become a bliss monkey and end up in the form or formless realms, right? And not get the job done in that particular lifetime. So on one hand, it is this natural protection. But on the other hand, we don't want to get stuck there because it's not a realm that we can actually cultivate virtue in. But it does, at the Vinaya level, count as a way of refraining from doing bad deeds. So that's another way of looking at the basis also. Okay. Next, he goes through the different types of renunciation. This is kind of cool because we've been saying all along that you need to have the motivation of renunciation to even want to do the Vinaya, to want to understand it. So the first level of renunciation that Jason Kappa talks about is the type of renunciation that we get when something bad happens to us. And it's pretty obvious that we don't want to be in that situation or feel that way, right? But as soon as the emotional distress passes, the renunciation isn't lasting. It's called goosebump renunciation. It's like, you get temporarily chilled and you get little goosebumps on your skin, and then the minute you warm up, they're gone. So, the second type of renunciation is just simply when you avoid. So it's not so much that you have the motivation of doing no harm. It's not like you've had a cessation of harming, but you just avoid situations that would put you in danger of doing harm. And that's okay. That's actually, that's a Lama Marut teaching, right? Like the first one is be a bump on a log, like just don't say anything. The second one is just like, no, that's the second one. The first one is just get yourself out of the situation, right? Like if you're in a situation that's going to cause you to say, think, or do something harmful, get yourself out of there. And then the second one is Master Shantideva's be a bump on the log. But this one is like Lama Marut's first one, where you have renunciation simply by avoiding the situations that might cause you to otherwise cause harm. But both of those are not lasting, because if you were back in that situation, you would still react in a negative way, right? And the third thing about renunciation, this is interesting because it's not about renunciation itself, but it's about the Vinaya. And there's something embedded in that statement that says that this particular state only lasts for this lifetime. It ends when you die. So that actually, this is a subtle thing. That actually indicates that it has to be referring only to the Vinaya vows and not your Bodhisattva or your Tantric vows, because Bodhisattva vows actually continue from lifetime, as do Tantric vows actually, even though we don't remember, therefore we take them again, right? But the Pratimoksha, they say, actually only lasts for one lifetime, and it ends there. So in this commentary where they're describing the different motivations for renunciation, they include that. And I know it's a little confusing. It's a technical detail, but just suffice it to say that the important thing to remember in that is that the Pratimoksha vows, the Vinaya vows, only last for this life. Okay?
The tantric ones also continue to?
And the Bodhisattva vows. They do say that all of us here are actually failed tantrikas. That's why we're here, to get the job done. Because you have to have that type of virtue to even be here. Because that's the whole thing about the tantric vows, is that you can actually amass huge virtue, but you can also like up really badly, right? So they say we're amnesiac yogis and failed tantrikas, and we're back here to remind ourselves so that we can actually get the job done.
Well, it makes sense now.
Yeah. They do say that. Okay, so moving on. I didn't write this on, but they're in your notes, which is, if you don't actually have a binder printed out, the online readings, the online notes, which are free at acidharma.org, are really beautiful. And all of this is in there. So Jason Kappa's next statement is a summary of the... It's actually like a mini outline of everything he's going to talk about. So what he's just gone through in this statement is a general overview of what the Pratimoksha vows are. So generally speaking, it's about no harm. Generally speaking, it's about having renunciation in its various forms, right? And now he's going to get more specific. So say Nowo, Dangni, Rabye, Dang, Sosoi, Nunzin, Kiewe Ten, Tongwei, Gyudang, Penyu. So, yeah, I'm sorry I don't have the actual Tibetan script for you. Geshe-la is such a Tibetan master. Mind you, he's a master in Sanskrit and Russian and Chinese now too, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if he also knew some Arabic languages by now also. If you listen to the audio, he breaks down each of those words again for us. Let me get to the actual translation for you, which is... the benefits... Okay, Jason Kappa's, that whole sentence means that he's going to describe the basic nature and categories of the individual sets of vows, how they arise, the basis that they're born of, how they're lost, and the benefits of keeping them. That's actually kind of what Jason Kappa does all the time. He tells you what's in it for you. He tells you how, like, why you should be interested in this, why you should take the vows, why you should keep them, how you can break them, and if you do break them, how you can fix them. Those are pretty common categories for everything that Jetsun Kappa teaches us. So that long Tibetan sentence, which I probably totally ruined the pronunciation of, is basically what he's saying in regards to the Vinaya vows. Okay? And for the actual specific breakdown of each word, you can listen to the audio. Really important thing that he says, though, in that statement. He says, I am going to write this commentary. I am going to explain all of the Vinaya to you. And I promise I will finish. This is a really important promise. And it's interesting, those of you who came to my yoga comic book meeting for Lama Yvonne and Lama Roger, they have said the same thing about that comic book and a retreat cookbook that we're working on. They've promised that they're going to finish, even if they die trying, is what they've said, which is what is insinuated in this line too. Jetsun Kappa makes a statement that I am going to finish this, and there are books in the Tengyur, in the commentaries of the Buddha speech, where the book just ends unfinished because the author died. Yeah. So it's kind of an act of truth. It's like a pretty brave statement to make, especially the Vinaya, because it's like lots and lots of texts, right? And Jetsun Kappa was a busy man, so mind you, he was already very realized. Speaking directly to Manjushri too, wasn't he? If I'm not mistaken. Okay, so what Jetsun Kappa does next is he's trying to describe what the Vinaya vows are made of. This actually leads us to a really interesting overview of some of the different schools of Buddhism that existed at the time. Because the different schools of Buddhism, and we're not talking about the schools as we know it as like the Gelug, like we're in the Gelugpa lineage, right? The Gelug, Sakya, Nyingma, Kagyu. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the specific breakdown of the schools of Buddhism, and they all basically, I mean, they all believed in this whole morality and ethics. They all believed in very similar things of codes of behavior and all that. Where they differed was their understanding of emptiness. And because of that, their understanding of what makes up the pratimoksha vows, whether they're actual physical or mental things, differs. On one level, it sounds like semantics, but it actually has to do with worldview, which is why we're given the breakdown of it in this class. Okay, so Geshe-la asks the question, what do you think a vow is? Like, how does it take form in your heart, in your mind? Is it something mental? Is it actually something that's tangible? And we're talking about doing no harm, right? So we're talking about the activity of your body, of your mind, of your speech. We're basically talking about karma. We're talking about the movement of your mind. And when we talk about that, Jetsun Kappa says basically you've got 4 choices. It's either something unchanging, like empty space. It's either mental or physical, or it's either neither mental nor physical, or it's changing. So it's changing, unchanging, physical or mental, or neither physical or mental. That's 5. But anyways, he says there's 4 things. So but you can actually break it down to 2. It's either changing or unchanging, physical or mental, or neither. Okay? And it actually gets into really interesting fuel for the debate ground. Have you guys still been doing debate once a month?
Yes.
Yeah.
Second part.
Okay, this would be a really good one to kick around on the debate ground. You know, actions. What are actions made of? Is lying a mental thought? Like, when you lie, you actually do something, right? You say something, but there's a mental thought that precedes that. So, is lying... Geshe-la asks, is it a sound or is it an activity? He doesn't actually answer it. These are really good questions for the debate ground. It's really good to kick it around. I'm going to give you 4 different viewpoints in terms of how these ancient schools understood the karma, understood what was defined here, okay? So we're talking about the vows, right? That was the question. What are the vows? Are they physical? Are they mental? Because we were talking about what they're able to do for us. So then now Jitsun Kappa is going to get more into detail about what are they? How are they formed? Like, how do they take hold? And so this actually begged the question, is it something physical or is it something mental? 2 schools believe one, 2 schools believe the other, and each school believes differently within the... Like, it sounds like 2 schools agree and 2 schools agree, and these schools don't agree with each other. But actually, even within the schools that seem to agree, they agree for different reasons. Okay, this is what we're going to break down. So, and this is actually important for the debate ground. Like, when you are debating, you actually have to say, well, what school are you in? What hat are you wearing? You can't debate tantric topics on a sutra debate ground. And, you know, there's all these, you have to be on common ground in a Buddhist debate. So the first school that we're going to look at is called the detailists. And they believe, they're called the detailists because they liked really detailed presentations of things. And they believe that vows are physical. Okay? They believe that vows permeate your physical body, your form, just like oil permeates a sesame seed. You can't, like, if you cut a sesame seed in half, you don't actually see any oil. But if you squeeze a sesame seed, you'll have oil coming out of it, right? I was just at a puja this weekend, and when the sesame seeds hit the fire, it's like throwing gas on the flame almost. It's like, you know, as opposed to some of the other materials that were thrown in. So there's definitely oil there, but it's permeated throughout, right? So the detailists say that vows are like that. They permeate your body. It's almost as if you have an aura once you have vows. They do believe that there is something physical. And it's interesting, like if you're at the ordination ceremony, you see the person receiving their vows, they're probably all emotional. Like, it's pretty obvious that something is happening. But if you just saw them on the street like a month later, like, can you see the vows? Like, can you, it's really subtle, right? But the detailist school says that there is something physical there.
Those schools, like, so when Shakyamuni Buddha, you know, was gathering his disciples, there was no school.
That's right.
So
These
how
came
did-
later.
they didn't came probably at the same time.
No. Just like there was no Gelugpa school until Jetsunkapa,
Right.
right? Yeah. So, but by the time Jetsunkapa was around, there were all these Buddhist schools. And he was really, really powerful at straightening out Dharma rumors and really bringing a lot of the schools together. He kind of cherry-picked the best from all of them to create the Gelugpa lineage to begin with. But he was really a unifying force. He wasn't the first scholar in the Tibetan history to do that, but he's our most recent. Arya Nagarjuna also did the same thing much earlier. Because if you actually look at Tibetan Buddhist history, there were a lot of ups and downs. There's a lot of violence, there's a lot of schisms, there's a lot of upheaval, political, all of the stuff that, a lot of caste systems, there were a lot of ups and downs. But all throughout, there have been really great sages, scholars, realized beings who come in and kind of straighten things out. And Jetsunkapa is the one in our most recent memory, head of the lineage of the Dalai Lama, and this is whose commentary we're studying. Okay. So interestingly enough, the detailists, another name for them is the Vaibhashka school, and Abhidharma is their main sort of focus. They believe vows are physical. The other school that believes vows are physical, interestingly enough, are the Prasangikas, the implication school, which we say we are. It's the highest of the four schools that we're talking about. They're also the middle way. We talk about Madhyamika a lot and the middle way schools. So they're called implication because the detailists are called detailists because they like detailed presentations, right? The implicationists like to implicate. They like to point out the obvious, usually in a sarcastic way, to not to make fun of you and belittle you, but to like snap you into your own wisdom. But the implication school doesn't believe it's physical like an aura. They believe that it's physical because vows are conceptual. Implication school is very, very, very subtle, comparatively.
So how many schools are there?
4 that we're going to talk about. There are more, but in this particular presentation, he's talking about 4. Okay?
Could you please repeat that? So they are physical?
So the implication school and the detailist school believe the vows are physical. The detailist school believes they're actually physical, like an aura, and the implication school is saying that it's a concept. Now, see, you can take that to the big gun, because isn't a concept mental? Isn't that a mental function? But they're saying, no, it's actually physical. It's physical, just like something that has shapes and colors. They don't believe it's matter, but they do believe that it's physical. And
So how would they like understand that, like, if there's an example as physical, like of the vow, like we can't see them.
well, the detailists say you can. That it's like an aura. Like some people can see auras, right? I can't see auras, but I do know people who can. So the detailists say that it's that type of physicality, where once you get the vow, it permeates you, just like oil permeates a sesame seed. Implication school says it's not that type of tangible physical. They say it's a concept, but they define concept as physical. It's a mental object. It's an object. in their definition. We're getting really technical here, and we're just being given these just as Jason Kappa, being the scholar that he is, and he likes to give us these types of specifics. You know, it does actually become, it's interesting. I find this whole thing is just really important seed planting, because you're not going to necessarily remember what the detailists or the implication or the mind only or whatever said in this particular class 3 of course 9. But when you get to ACI 15, Trangye, what the Buddha meant, was it literal or figurative? And really where it matters is in your understanding of emptiness, because what we're trying to do is get to such a heightened intellectual understanding of emptiness that you will flop over into your DPE, right? That's when these differences actually do count, like to be able to discern, because it's not whether it's better or worse or more sophisticated or less subtle. It really is just different states of mind that we can shift through in any given moment. It's like if when you study Mahamudra or understanding the flavors of emptiness, they're different ways that we will look at our world at any given moment. So it's useful to understand the sort of historical, technical description. When it happens to you, you'll recognize it. Okay? And really, the differences in the schools do trace themselves back to a different definition and understanding of emptiness. That is what it comes down to. But we're not talking about emptiness here. We're talking about karma, and we're talking about the vows and whether they take form or how they take form. So those are the two schools that believe that they're physical. So this is just a report. Military Dharma Bhata is just reporting what the schools say, okay? So the Vaibhashka, the detailists, to them, the Pratimoksha vows are physical. To the implication, the Madhyamika, middle way, they say they're a conceptualization. The other two schools are the Sutra school and the mind only, okay? And they both believe that vows are mental. So, we're actually not given we're not given as much detail in this class as to why, the way we are with detailist and implication, because they both believe that they're mental, but they both believe they're mental in different ways. And if any of you have taken Mahamudra, you can take that back to your understanding of what the difference between a sutrist and a mind only would be, because mind only is the lower half of the highest school, and sutra school would be considered one of the lower schools. So there would be, again, a difference in the conceptualization of emptiness, but they're taking it from the mental aspect, not the physical. Okay? So that whole Tibetan sentence that we were given before, in the first instance, talks about the two schools that believe they're mental. There's another Tibetan sentence which I didn't actually have you say. Here, let's say it now. Pongwe, Samba, Gyun Chakpa, Sabung, Danche, Yin no She. This statement talks about the two schools that believe that it's mental. And this translates to, some people say the individual freedom vows are the intention to give up bad deeds along with the seeds for that intention which resides in the mental stream. Yeah. See, with there is a subtle difference here. They both think it's mental. One thinks it continues in a stream, and the other one thinks that it's a... Have you guys heard the word bakchak?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know
It's
about
an imprint. It's a well, Geshe-la uses the word propensity or intention, and
Seed.
bakchak is the it is a seed. Yeah, it is a seed, but it goes along with the idea that there is a kunshi, which is a storehouse, this physical place where the seeds reside, right? But they do believe that the bakchaks themselves are mental, and that it's like this intention, this propensity. And then the other mental belief, the other school believes that it's this continuation of a mental stream. Anyways, again, we're getting into really technical stuff here. Suffice it to say that two of the schools, the detailist and the implication, believe that vows are physical, and the sutrists and the mind-only schools believe, the Chittamaran is another way of saying mind-only, believe that they're mental. Okay? And that's really all we're given in this course, because we're not actually given the arguments of the schools. I'm giving you a little bit more background from that actually come from other ACI classes, ACI courses, because there are other ACI courses that really break down the 5 schools of Buddhism actually, and really go into a lot of detail on the differences. And then when you get to ACI 15, which does talk about what the Buddha really meant, when did he speak literally and when did he speak figuratively? That's the course where you really get an explanation of mind only and a beautiful, beautiful detail of that whole philosophy. Because mind only isn't the Prasangika school, it's the lower half, but it's a really beautiful way to get to a very precise understanding of emptiness. So here we're just being given the report. Okay? And again, I think it's just a big conspiracy to plant seeds so that by the time you get to 15, they pop. They say that that explanation we were just given of the 4 schools explains what the vows are made of and where they stay. Although I have to say it's kind of as clear as mud to me in terms of, because we're just basically given a report on the opinions of these schools, right? We're not given a definitive, okay, here's where the vows are and here's where they stay, because it doesn't work like that, right? And we're going to be unpacking all of that in the next 4 or 5 classes. The last topic that we will cover today is actually, it's technically kind of mind-numbing, but it's actually conceptually a short class. And the last thing that we're going to cover, so no dance break today, okay? But the last thing that we're going to cover today are the 8 different groups of vows covered in the Pratimoksha, covered in the Vinaya. So, yeah, I won't write these down. Say Nienne.
Nienne.
Nienne are one-day vows. And these only last for 24 hours, okay? They define 24 hours as from when the sun rises the next morning and you can see the lines in your palm. That's the actual definition.
That's not the same Niente.
Without electrical light.
Is it the same Niente that says...
It's Nienne.
Oh, Nienne.
Yeah. it's just a very short vow, but you can take 1-day vows. Then there's, say, Gainyan, Pa, and Gainyan, Ma. Pa and Ma are what you think. It's father and mother. It's male and female. Yeah. Actually, no. It's Gainyan means lifetime layperson's vows. So Gainyan Pa would be lifetime layman's vows, and Gainyan Ma would be lifetime laywoman's vows. Okay? And so Pa means male, Ma means female in this context.
Do they count as one of the 8 or 1, 2 of the 8?
They count as 2 and 3. Okay. So 1 is Nyanne, gotcha. 2 is Gennem Pa, and 3 is Genyen Ma. But they are both lifetime lay. We call them lay person's vows, but in Tibetan they have the gender. The word identifies the gender, so they separate them. The next 2 are also 2 separate, but they're again the same. Well, actually, they're not the same level anymore, and we're going to get into that in a future class. But say Getsul Pa and Getsul Ma. So we're using the Pa and the Ma again. Getsul means novice. So Getsul Pa is novice monk's vows, and Getsul Ma is novice nun's vows. Okay? So that would be the vows 4 and 5. I mean, vow subject, right? Topic 4 and 5. These aren't the actual vows. We're giving the breakdown of the different groups of vows. So the 6th one, say Gelopma. This means intermediate nun's vows. There is no intermediate monk's vows, by the way. And then say Gelong Ma and Gelong Pa. So Gelong Ma is a fully ordained nun's vows, and there are 364 of them. And Gelong Pa is a fully ordained monk, and there are 253 of those.
How many for the nuns, sorry?
364. They have more vows.
And monks?
253 for monks. So actually, and it hasn't changed yet. They've been trying to change it. The Dalai Lama is certainly entertaining a lot of discussion on it.
For the vows?
But there are no fully ordained Tibetan nuns, fully ordained in the Tibetan, like we have fully ordained Tibetan nuns, but they're fully ordained in another tradition, like in a Chinese tradition or in a Theravada tradition or something. The reason being, in the history of Tibet, I told you there were lots of ups and downs. Well, one of the downs was that there was this king who severed the lineage of fully ordained nuns by killing them. You require a certain quorum to ordain a new nun, and there weren't enough.
Like, does it have to be a quantity?
Yeah. A quorum is a certain, like if you have a board of directors, the bylaws stipulate that you need a certain number of them to be present for a vote to count. That's a quorum.
You don't have enough female who wants to be nun?
No, it's not that. We don't have enough fully ordained nuns who can actually ordain a female who wants to be a fully ordained nun. So we have enough for novice and for intermediate, but not for fully. Yeah.
Like in our lineage.
In the Tibetan lineage. In our lineage, there are really great nuns, but they're like, for example, Venerable Jigme, who is a fully ordained nun, and she's a American Tibetan nun, but she was ordained in the Chinese tradition to be fully ordained, right? And Geshe-la has definitely given ordination vows, but to fully ordain a female as a fully ordained nun in the strictly Tibetan Buddhist tradition is impossible at this point. And there have been a lot of, I don't know all the details, but I do know enough to know that there has been great discussion in the last, 30 years at least, to try and change that. And from what I hear, they're making headway. Nuns are now able to debate, they're allowed to be geshes now, which actually didn't happen before. So it's moving in the right direction. But as far as I know, and if some of you find information to correct me, please bring it. But as far as I know, it still hasn't. I think we would hear if it actually had changed.
What would it take for that to happen?
It would actually it would take a lot of changing of the rules, because from the day that king slaughtered the ordained nuns, there just hasn't been.
Why did he slaughter them?
You know what? I don't know what his mind was, but I suspect that he was crazy. And I suspect that he probably wanted to destroy. There were a lot of reasons why various atrocities happened in history in the name of religion, or in the name of destroying religion, right? Probably power. I mean, that's the most common. The monasteries were the universities. They were the higher education. They were the schools. They had the ruling power. They had the love of the people. So, a lot can be said. It could be fear. I don't know the reason, but I do know that this story is told as it's a real incident that happened in history, because to this day we don't have the fully ordained lineage back. And it was a king. They do talk about how he was mad, and they also talk about the bodhisattva that released his capsule, which is a very technical way of saying they killed him to end the atrocity. But they do say it was a high bodhisattva who, if you know your bodhisattva vows, if you have the power, you can read the minds, you can actually send this being to a better existence. You have to. If there's no other recourse and you're the only one who can do it, you must. So they call it the being in the black hat, and there's a black hat dance that happens even in the temples today around that, the being who ended the slaughter, but it was not soon enough to revive the lineage. So we're given the 8 different groups of vows, but that 7th one in the Tibet, so again, that's not to say there aren't nuns in the Tibetan lineage who are fully ordained, but they're not fully ordained in the Tibetan, right? Got it? Yeah. So we'll get more into the explanation of the actual vows. Oh, there's something that wasn't, we're going to get into this in another class, but I just am going to mention it because it's kind of sweet. There is something called a ragne. It's not even in here because it's not a vow, or it's not classified as one of the groups of vows, but there is this preliminary step that happens before you become ordained, and it's when you leave the home life and you're basically you've set your intention, and you're basically making a statement to the world that you are following this path to ordination. And we'll get into that in a next class or two, where they'll talk about because you actually have to take that step before you can become. So between the 1 day vow or the lifetime vows, and before you can become a novice monk or nun, you have to take this preliminary step of leaving the home life, and there is a term for that too. But we'll get into that more when we unpack it.
They have to be monastery when they decide to ordain. Like they have to live and
traditionally, historically, that's how it happened. Yeah.
How about now? ordain and stay in specific areas?
It's a little different in America because the American culture is not one that has been built on, like in Tibet, in Asia, the whole culture supports the monastic system, right? That type of support doesn't exist in North America. So it's a little bit different in the way we understand it. But yes, for the nuns and monks in our immediate lineage, they are all at Diamond Mountain or in Phoenix, right? Like that's, so that, even though it's not a monastery, their lives are around, or they attend Geshe Michael or Lama Christi or whatever, like they're the attendants of. So they don't actually have an address, right? Like they don't own a home. So they are very much in that they've left the home life and they've devoted themselves 24/7 to a spiritual life. And with that is in service of the school or the temple or our lineage, our school does relate back to Saramay Monastery, and most of them have had education directly at Saramay or outreach or back and forth. And yes, there are people in our lineage who are that intermediate or that preliminary stage, and they actually, there are some people who stay in that state permanently, who don't actually then go on to be a novice monk. And you know what? You all know one of them, and her name is Mercedes. And she is one of Geshe Michael's close personal attendants. She's not a nun. She's not a novice nun, but she has lifetime layperson's vows, and she has these Rabjung vows, the one who has left the home life. Yeah. So it means that if she actually chooses at some point to become a nun, she's done that preliminary step, Yeah.
Is Saramay only was a school for monks?
For men. Yeah. There's a beautiful nunnery set up by Tenzin Palmo. Do you guys know who she is? Read the book Cave in the Snow. Exquisite book. Do any of you know Leslie Kovitz? Actually, she goes by Yeshe Palmo now, right? She's part of the, not Salt Spring, part of Hollyhock. And Leslie, Yeshe Palmo, is the personal attendant of Tenzin Palmo, who is a Tibetan nun. She's not American, British?
London, yeah.
Tibetan British nun, who, incredible woman, who spent almost 12 years in retreat, actually, and has set up a nunnery in India that actually teaches monastery level training for women. And she's been instrumental. She actually is the one that brought His Holiness to tears when she challenged him in open forum about this fully ordained nun situation, saying it was just atrocious in this day and age. And this was going back, like she did this like 20 years ago or 30 years ago, where basically said, this has to change. It's a human rights issue and this, that, and whatever. And she's called him on it, and is, in her own quiet and powerful way, providing a space where women can get the equivalent in education. And I'm sure she was instrumental in that Geshe degree thing too. I don't know if it was, it's not just her. There's a lot of very, very dedicated women in Buddhism who are working hard. But I know she's an interesting one to read about because she is in the Tibetan lineage and is alive today too. So pretty interesting. Cave in the Snow. Tenzin Palmo is her name. Yeah. Any other questions? Because that actually is class.
Thank you.
We're all good? It was technical. Like a lot of the stuff is a little dry. You can stop it now, yes. Unless there's more questions. Okay.